Welcome to Have You Heard, where we talk about issues at the intersection of agriculture and engineering. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Morgan Hayes and Josh Jackson.
Welcome. This is the Have You Heard podcast. This is episode 21. We're going to speak today a little bit about weather. We have special guest Matt Dixon here with us today, giving us a little bit of update on maybe the hay season weather trends that we've seen and some outlooks for what's coming. Hopefully, good news, enough rain, but not too much rain.
Oh, man. It's been a very wet April. Compared to where we were in March.
Yep, we're starting to get worried in March.
Josh was mentioning that D word.
Drought.
You got to be quiet when we say that. No. But yeah, it was getting dry in March. I want to say South Central, Southeastern Kentucky were the worst off. Southeastern Kentucky coming into April still hasn't seen as much rainfall compared to the rest of the state. But conditions have turned around. We're no longer talking about drought.
Yep, we were worried about a 2007 event.
2007, it's been a while since we've seen a drought. 2012, of course, we've had some short-term droughts. 2019, never hurt you guys.
September
that year, driest September on record. I think we averaged 0.02 of an inch that year. And then 2016, that was wildfire season in southeastern Kentucky. And then Gatlinburg, we all remember that. But it's definitely turned around coming into April. I bring the stats, you guys know that. So month-to-date rainfall for April so far, and this is through April 19th, the state has averaged 3.62 inches, which is about an inch above normal. Now, that doesn't tell the whole story. We go to Western Kentucky, they've averaged 4.78 inches, so they're getting close to 5. You go to Eastern Kentucky, they're at 2.5. So there's almost a 2.5 inch difference between Eastern Kentucky and Western Kentucky in terms of total precip accumulation. So quite wet over in Western Kentucky. I know Plant 2022 has been a struggle to get started. It's also been very cool in April, and I know that's impacted you guys a little bit.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that. It's you sort of have hope that grass is coming, things get green, you think things are growing, and then we get another snap where it's 30 something at night, a number of nights in a row, and grass looks real slow and dormant again for a couple more days. So
we still have cows who haven't put on pasture yet, just because they're still eating a lot of hay, just because we don't feel like it's ready quite yet to support the animal.
We just moved our cattle out this past weekend.
Okay.
I don't know if that was a good decision or not. I feel confident that we're past most of the frost at this point. But I don't know that it was a good decision or not. It just was, there were animals that were refusing to eat hay, and at a certain point they can see grass. They want the grass, they don't want the hay, and it was the only solution that was practical at that point.
Okay. I've told mine keep eating hay.
Is it working?
It's working for the most part. They're locked up and they're pretty much feeding out the hay, and they get rather angry.
Yeah.
So keep eating.
So good news. Our average date of our last freeze here in Kentucky is typically the second week of April. So we're past that now. Doesn't necessarily mean we can't see another freeze. I mean, you guys remember 2020, May 9th that year. I think portions of Kentucky got to the upper 20s, and that decimated the winter wheat crop that year. But yeah, it can happen, but based on the outlooks, I'm hoping we're done.
Okay.
Which I'm sure you guys will be on board with that. So,
yeah. No complaints. If we're past frost, it would be good for the grass to really have a chance to take off here.
So we're getting ready to warm up this weekend. Are we seeing that, it's going to warm up? When I say warm up, it's going to go to 80. Are we Kentucky's somewhat bipolar sometimes. We have a very short spring, it seems.
And me and you were talking about yesterday. something I haven't seen this year, and something me and my the retired director of the Ag Weather Center, Tom Pretty, used to say, we always look for this, what we call a biological explosion during the spring month. It's really warm outside, and I feel like we've had bouts of 70-degree temperatures here and there, but nothing long lived for a week or something. And same thing with this upcoming week. We've been cool to start the week. We're warming up today. What is today? April 20th. We're getting into the 60s. And then by this weekend, we're talking low 80s. Saying that, we got another cold front on the way Monday. And we're dropping back down. Below normal temperatures in the forecast next week. For this time of year, normal highs around 70 degrees. Normal lows, upper 40s, low 50s. So below normal temperatures in place. I suppose, look at the models this morning, we could see some 30s here and there. I'm not seeing much in the way of sub-freezing temperatures, but we're getting to that point in the year. It's obviously warmer going into May, and below normal temperatures aren't as significant as what they would have been in early April, late March, so on and so forth. Yes, maybe bad news for you all. The up and down roller coaster trend continues here in Kentucky, but we'll get warm one of these days, and then we'll be complaining about it being too warm and humid, and we'll want to go backwards. But we're not there yet. So
I wouldn't complain if it would stay warm for a little while, but even though we haven't seen that sustained warmth, we've had a couple of those peaks, and most of my younger trees are starting to bud and new leaves are starting to shoot, and sort of getting to the point where even the trees that are a little slower to start are starting to really show leaf. So I kind of feel like we're getting close.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
It just might take another week or two. Huh?
Yeah. And me and Josh were talking yesterday about growth this year, and maybe not so much compared to recent years.
Yeah, it's definitely, our grass, because we were just talking about that, it's been a lot slower, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
So after we got to talking about that yesterday, I decided to look into growing degree day accumulations. For alfalfa, you usually use a base temperature for growth of 41 degrees. So I ran the data for 3 locations, Lexington, Bowling Green, and Paducah. And looking at the past 5 years, for the most part, we've accumulated the least amount of growing degree days in 2022 compared to those past 5 years. So that hints growth isn't where it has been in recent years at this time of the spring. So might have a little explanation there. This cool and wet April, haven't seen the growing degree day accumulations like we typically do. We'll see if that changes here soon. Obviously, we'll see those accumulations go pretty high this weekend with temperatures in the 80s, but with below normal temperatures next week, we'll see.
So do you think, this is just out of curiosity, but do you think that 5-year is typical that you were looking at, or do you think more long-term seasonal data would say that the last 5 years have been unseasonably warm?
I would agree. The past 5 years have been unseasonably warm. This year we've ran a little cooler. I suppose looking at the data, last year was a little cool too to start April. But this past decade, we've been trending warmer, not only on an annual basis, but on a seasonal basis also. So maybe a little bit of a hiccup in 2022. We'll see if we see a warmer spring next year. But past data, the past decade says warmer springs than what we've seen in the past.
Warmer and wetter, or just warmer?
Warmer and wetter. So I got some stats here. I talked at the Forge conference last fall about it. We're getting warmer and wetter in the Bluegrass State. And looking at spring coming up, Comparing the 1981 to 2010 normals, what we typically average for precipitation through the spring season, compared to the new normals of 1991 through 2020. Lexington, we went from 12.93 inches on average to 14.34 inches on average. Paducah, 13.63 to 14.68. A little more than an inch more of accumulation during the spring season, and Bowling Green's about the same. So we are getting wetter during the spring, and that's definitely going to have an impact on you all when harvest comes around. So
It's almost time. I mean, Morgan and I have been talking almost every podcast where we're saying we're repairing all of our equipment from last year. And so repairing balers, tractors, this and that. And even this weekend, we're still working on taking off tractors. So as far as baling days, if you consider baling days, how are they changed? How is it looking over time? How do they change year to year?
So I looked into this last year. Baling days are going down with this wetter climate we are now in.
So this is 3 baling days, like 3 dry days or 4 dry days?
So what I'm looking at right now is cut on day 1 and then bale on day 4.
Okay.
Spring season.
To be typical.
Yeah. And based on that data in, let's say, Lexington, between 2000 and 2021, our average baling days, that 4th day, if we added those up throughout May and June, we were averaging about 5.5, 6.5 baling days during those 2 months. Now, if we look at the past 5 years, these wetter conditions we've been in, we saw those numbers go down from 5.5 baling days in May to 4. So losing a day and a half in the way of baling days on average. June went from 6.5 to 5. So again, we're losing baling days. It's going to be even more important for you all to find those periods of dry conditions and take advantage whenever you can, because with a wetter climate in place, who knows when that next 4-day window is going to come. Bowling Green, same thing, losing a day or so in the way of baling days in May. Looking at Paducah, 2 days down in May, about a day in June. So everyone across the state's pretty well lost a day or two over the past 5 years with this wetter climate in place.
It's kind of amazing, and it does sort of feel like that you're really chasing your tail a little bit in the spring hay season. The first cutting is really tough to get up. Last year, I felt like I was caught a little bit sitting on my heels because we typically bale right around Memorial Day. That's a lot of times our target for our first baling window is right around there because the grass is mature enough to take at that point. This last year, where it was warmer than this year, it was ready a little bit earlier, but we had a window, I think it was maybe 10 days into May or so.
Yep, early May.
And we didn't take advantage of it because the grass could really have used another week. And we thought, well, maybe we'll get another window. And we really almost didn't get another window until after Memorial Day. So we hit pretty hard once we had a window, but we expected a window to show up in the next 2 weeks, and it didn't show up again until the very end of May, getting into June. And it can be a little bit trickier if you're anticipating a couple windows in a month and nothing shows up for
3 or 4 weeks.
For 20 days or so.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big surprise. And I guess it shouldn't be a surprise. I guess that's maybe what you're trying to tell us, is that we should just expect not very many windows.
Expect it. Take advantage when you can.
So go ahead and cut them early if you have to get it cut.
And don't get mad at the weatherman if he's wrong about the forecast. So
we can get mad and curse a little bit under our breath, right? We just can't send hate mail.
Hey, I'll tell you guys what though. I'd rather have the wet conditions. I know it can give you guys a headache. I'd much rather have that, more rain than drought. So again, don't want to say that word. We don't want to bring that to
reality. Like Voldemort, just don't say it.
So, but Yeah, and I took a go ahead.
And part of that is just also like the variability. So I mean the range you have, because sometimes in May it's 0 baling days, and some May and June it can be 0, then maybe up to 15 days. So really that average, there's a lot of there can be. You have to also think about that range. Sometimes you don't get that opportunity.
Definitely. So going back to 2021, I got to think about my years now. There were some windows. You were just talking about.
Yeah, there was probably one window in there, but the way that the forecast came through, there was not enough confidence on that one window. Yeah. And it was a short one. It was definitely a 4-day window, maybe 3.5-day window. That would have worked, but the problem is, as someone who sells hay, you don't want to cut and then have it rained on, because it depends on your fields and how they grow. But our first cutting is usually very clean on our mixed grass hay. I know that people with alfalfa and other things don't like first cutting because it tends to be a little bit weedy, and the way it comes in is a little bit more spotty, and there's some quality issues on it. But our actual mixed grass hay on first cutting tends to be our cleanest. We tend to get a couple different weeds as we get into July that we maybe are less likely to want from a horse perspective. Some of the ryegrass will give you a little bit of texture that's problematic for some horse foxtail, things like that. So for us, that first cutting is really critical to get up dry and clean, because that's usually our tenderest grass for our hay customers.
And plus, I think a challenge with that first cutting is like sometimes you get the red clover in there, and it's really hard to sometimes get it to dry down correctly. So we're both doing dry hay.
Yeah, we are both doing dry hay, and I will agree with you. Any of our fields that are heavy clover, we use a conditioning thing to try and get the clovers and the legumes to really break down enough to dry out. Critical. Yep. And 2, with the nighttime still being cooler, we pick up a lot of dew on those leaf versus blade grasses, and those leaf grasses, because of how they hold that moisture, we have a very short window to bale during the day. Sometimes it might be 4 o'clock before we feel confident to go out there and start baling. And so you've only got from 4 to 7 because the dew will start coming up at 7. So it's a very tricky window. And when you have a lot of rain still on the table on day 4, you're not sure. Day 5 looks pretty bad.
Plus you got to move it out of the field.
And you got to move it in. All of that has to happen. We'll still bite the bullet if we think we have confidence on a 4-day window, but if the window doesn't look like 4 days, it's risky to take early in the season.
And plus, you get that early May. For us, May, you never know what 30 to 50% actually means.
That's true.
On a 3 to 5 day forecast.
Yeah, by August, you know what it means a little bit better. 30% on some years means absolutely rain, and 30% other years means it's never going to rain again.
Yeah.
Well, and as a meteorologist, the springtime, it's the transitional months. So like you said, forecast confidence isn't quite as high as maybe what you're seeing late in summer. So something to take into account, unfortunately, but that's the case. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it is. It's just sort of it's a tricky window at that time of year, because it definitely is a longer drying period. In August, you can get hay up in 3 days. Yes. A lot of times if you're getting warm nighttime temperatures, but in May, that does not happen. There's no forgiveness on that. You really need that 4th day, and you really need some sun.
Need some sun. Yeah, those need to be sunny days.
That's right. It's a little trickier. Apologies, we lost our... We get a little
technical difficulties there.
We'll get this new room figured out eventually. It's just going to be a little slower going. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about trends. We know we're looking at a little bit of a wetter season. It's been warmer, although this year looks to be not warmer, but potentially not wet or dry at this point in the year. We're sort of in between. What's coming?
What's our 3-month outlook?
So 3-month outlook. Once again, we're in transitional. We'll see how this verifies, but The current 3-month outlook suggests above normal temperatures for the months of April, May, and June, and near to above normal precipitation. We'll see if that verifies. Once again, April has been cooler. I think ultimately we've seen near normal temperatures for the month of April. It just feels like those cooler days have outrun those warmer days we've had. But this goes along with our warmer, wetter climate. Forecasting 3 months out can be tricky. We use climate patterns and whatnot when making these predictions. And those climate patterns are, I guess, have a stronger, I'm trying to think of what the word I'm looking for. There's stronger confidence in those climate patterns during the winter months, especially for a climate pattern like ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. You see the main impacts of that oscillation during the winter time. But with these transitional months of spring, can make the confidence in the forecast a little dicey.
So when we get into late summer, will there be more confidence in like a 3-month outlook?
Should be. I don't have those in front of me right now.
Yeah.
But
just generally year over year, that is, the transition months are always going to be less confident than the
spring and fall season.
Okay.
So more confidence during the summer season and the winter season. Less so post transition.
So this is the El Nino or La Nina year? What are we looking at there?
So we just got through our second winter of La Nina. They called it a double dip La Nina.
Is that common?
It's not very common. We're still indifferent of where we're going to go next winter. So maybe we'll have another podcast on this, maybe going into fall this year and check back in. But yeah, double dip La Nina. Don't see it a whole lot. But
what is the percentage of years that are El Nino versus La Nina?
So it goes back and forth. 1-2 years, La Nina, El Nino. I might have some. There's another phase of neutral, kind of in between. You're not seeing the impacts of El Nino or La Nina. But yeah, there is a transition between the two. It all depends on sea surface temperatures out in the equatorial Pacific Ocean. If you have cooler sea surface temperatures in place, you are in a La Nina pattern. If you have warmer sea surface temperatures in place, you are in a El Nino pattern. And what that does is it basically takes our jet stream, takes it another direction, and impacts the type of weather pattern we see here in the Ohio Valley and across the world. So during La Ninas, typically wetter, maybe a little warmer. El Nino, I do see that mild pattern, but drier conditions here in the Ohio Valley. So it's really that precipitation, whether you're going to be drier or wetter here in Kentucky. Past 2 La Ninas, wetter winters in place.
Interesting.
Also more hurricanes going to be hitting up this way, or?
So La Nina enhances hurricane activity. El Nino suppresses hurricane activity.
Which is surprising because you think the warmer water would be.
Yeah. Well, and so El Nino, I guess for you guys want the rain. So we want to be rooting for La Nina, even though I will say the past 2 years we've been in a La Nina. And they've been 2 very active hurricane seasons for the Atlantic Ocean. We'll see what that looks like going into this fall and winter, but we're not there yet.
It's been all kinds of technical difficulties today. Can't even ask a question. It doesn't have a mic that's functioning today.
I'm bad luck, guys. So hopefully that bad luck doesn't carry into the spring season for.
Hopefully not.
If you bring us that, we might not invite you back on the podcast.
You know, the weatherman can be a good guy or a bad guy. So.
Well, he's a villain. Isn't he a villain? It doesn't matter.
So.
Nobody's happy. Some people want rain. Some people want it dry. So catch 22. I feel like.
Yeah. Make everyone happy.
Nope. Might as well make the farmers at least happy.
Yeah.
So, I guess do we need to talk about what's going on the farm this week?
Yeah, why don't you give a quick update and then we'll finish up that way on the podcast today.
All right. So I guess if we're looking at what's coming up this weekend, if it's going to be so warm, hopefully I'm hoping the manure spread is done by this weekend. Try to spread some manure if possible. Otherwise, we're still working on repairing equipment. Put out some of the hay. So I mentioned still forcing the cows to eat some hay before I really want to move them, and make sure my rotation scheme has enough grass there. We're not going to move any cows. We're going to move our spring herd. So the spring herd is on grass.
Okay.
So, but our fall herd, which is the bulk of the herd, we're keeping them held off on hay until we know the grass is growing. Then we can definitely put them on our pastures and start rotating.
Yeah, so we moved all of our cattle last weekend, resorted our groups. We did our pregnancy check. We had actually very good pregnancy rates. Again, we had 3 open out of 58 animals. And so that's, for us, that's a 95% bred. So excellent news in the one regard. On the other hand, we held back heifers, assuming slightly larger numbers of open animals. So we have some culls that we're going to make. So we had to make some decisions, sorted some animals back that will sell bred later this summer. Once they're late bred being 6 or more months bred. So in July, we'll sell them as bred cows. We'll hold on to our heifers and calve them out for 2 reasons. One, I think it's easier to sell a bred cow than a bred heifer generally. And then also we can actually do some evaluations on the performance of those heifers before we make culling decisions or
get some information on before you sell them.
Exactly. So that's sort of our goal in that group. So they got resorted and put out on grass on Sunday, and then we have calves in the barn this weekend. We will have to make a couple decisions about them as well. Getting ready to get them sold if we can here in early May, but want to make sure they're on the right feed for their size right now. Pull off the ones that we need to. And repairing equipment is always part of the task, so we'll have a little bit of work on that as well. And so it should be a pretty good weekend. Hopefully we get a little bit done. Glad the weather looks to be nice.
Yep.
We could use a good weekend. Got to finish up calving season here for spring herds.
Okay. Yeah,
how's your calf watch looking?
Not too bad. We have about 4 more we're watching. A couple, 2 that are in there they were originally AI bred, so we figured they're coming with natural surface bull at this point. The cleanup bull, and then the other 2 we had were later AI breds. So they're definitely bagging up, looking ready. We just kind of waiting it out and get them calved out here, and then we'll be done.
We have 7 left to calve out of our 35, so we're doing well still. Probably have at least 1 or 2 more. But aside from that, that will be our weekend, is hopefully getting all of that. We only have a few more weeks, and I want to have calves on the ground before hay season starts if we can.
Because then it's just chaos.
It will be chaos at that point. Yes, it will. So with that, I think this was a good podcast, a good day.
Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I don't know if I feel better or worse after talking to you. I never am sure about that. The weatherman always makes me a little anxious. It's sort of like going to the doctor, isn't it? Like you're not sure if the answer is going to be something you want to hear, so you're not sure if you should listen. Just kidding. With that, well, thank you guys for joining us today, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Have You Heard is a production of the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, along with the Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering. Discover what's wildly possible at ca.uky.edu.